Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Mayoral Applicants Interview Forum. My name is Nancy Maxson, and I will be moderating this evening's forum. I'm with the Missoula League of Women Voters. The City Council asked the League to assist with designing the format for this forum and to moderate it. The League has a proud reputation for being nonpartisan and fair, and we are honored to have been asked to participate in this process. Tonight, the Missoula City Council will question 8 nominees for the position of Missoula's mayor. Mayor Dan Kemmis will be stepping down in September. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Mayor Kemmis for his distinguished years of public service and to wish him well in what I'm sure is going to be a fascinating new career. The 8 nominees for Missoula's mayor are seated in alphabetical order at the head of the room. I will be asking them a series of prepared questions. A City Council subcommittee distilled these questions from public calling questions, questions from city staff members, and questions from council members. Each council member will also have the opportunity to ask the applicants one spontaneous question. Applicants will have 1 minute to respond to all questions. Responses will be timed, and the timer is beside me. There will also be 2 follow-up dialogues among the applicants, where they will be able to clarify previous statements or comment on statements made by any of the other applicants. We will conclude the forum with 2-minute closing comments from each applicant. This evening, the City Council is interviewing the nominees. Monday, July 22nd, at its regular meeting, the Council will select a new mayor. I'd like to now introduce our 8 nominees. They are Jeff Badnock, Jerry Ballas, Ginny Cass, Mert Charney, Doug Harrison, Mike Cadis, Al Sampson, and Craig Sweet. Our first question this evening is a short one. The council members would like to know, in 1 or 2 words, if elected, are you planning to run for re-election? And we'll begin with Mr. Badnock.
If I am elected mayor by the council, I could not honestly say right now whether I would run for re-election at the end of Mayor Kemmis's term. I don't think any answer I could give I could be held to at this time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ballas?
If appointed by the council to fulfill the mayor's term, I have no intention whatsoever of running for re-election or a permanent mayor position. I have no intention of being a political politician in my goal. My basic intent of trying to do this was to try to provide an interim caretaker mayor with some experience in the city, and then provide a level playing field for those candidates that do wish to run for office and campaign.
Thank you. You do have to speak directly into the microphone, so if you would slide that over. And Ms. Cass, would you plan to run for election?
I didn't become a candidate for appointment here because I wanted to be ex-mayor. I think I can do a good job as mayor. I am not going to say at this time that I definitely will run or that I definitely will not run.
Thank you. Mr. Charney? Thank you. Mr. Harrison?
I would strongly consider running for re-election in the city continue progressive and after the last several years.
Mr. Cadis?
It would be my intention to run for mayor. I do believe that there's a large investment that's made by the city in training a mayor, and I'd like to get some return to the city on that investment.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson?
At this time, I have no intention of running for mayor.
Thank you. And Mr. Sweet?
As I said when I announced that I was interested in this position, I would run for re-election or appointments. So I will run for re-election.
Thank you. At this time, we have a little technical aside. We want you to check your microphones, please. And now we'll move on to the second question. For this question and for all successive questions, you will have 1 minute to answer, and we will be timing your responses. What are the 3 most important issues facing Missoula, and how would you deal with them? This time we'll begin with Mr. Ballas.
The basic purpose of city government is to provide for the public health, safety, and well-being of the citizens. And when I think of those 3 terms, I think of related items. Public health, I think of water quality, and I believe that the best way to promote water quality is to expand and improve our sewer system. I think we've moved to the west pretty well. I think our next task is to protect our water that is coming from the east. The second item is safety. I think we need to continue to implement and improve our police and fire safety. And the third one, the well-being, I think the most important aspect is to implement our managed growth policies and get something active in that area.
Thank you. Ms. Cass?
I believe we need to attract more employers to Missoula and to support our small businesses. We have a lot going for us. We have our location. There's available recreation, reasonably good transportation, air, rail, and roads. We have a small town feel, but we have city services. We have medical facilities, a university, great restaurants, talented and educated people who are devoted to maintaining their community as a good place to live. We need more than just half-time minimum wage jobs without benefits, however. Another issue is taxes. We can't do much about taxes that come down to us from the state and federal government, but we may be able to control taxes to some degree by responsible spending. Housing prices and rental costs have risen to the point that some people have to choose between paying the rent and feeding themselves and their families. I know this is true. Recently, it came to light that a woman in town was eating nothing but cereal.
Mr. Charney.
Very short order, the financial crunch coming up, and I would propose a new budgeting system so that the people of Missoula will know exactly, or in better terms at least, what their taxes are going for. Community input, and I would deal with that problem with an open door policy, starting out guaranteeing at least 2 hours a week, open on my calendar for citizens to come to my office and talk about any subject they wish to. The third item would be leadership, and I would deal with that with a more hands-on policy for administrating the city.
Thank you. Mr. Harrison.
Okay, don't start timing yet. I get it. We got three major issues, and how you're going to deal with them in a minute. So this is tough. Okay. Okay, the 3 most important issues facing Missoula today are growth, quality of life issues, and taxes. Growth, I'll continue to strongly support the growth management process. As long as we're able to continue with some type of balance in that process, I believe that this can be very successful and benefit the community in the long run. Even though we've been at this over 2 years, I think that we have just started to scratch the surface in this area. In addition to identifying areas that we can work together, we have the monumental task of interfacing those areas so that we can get a total picture for this community. The second area that deals with quality of life issues. This covers some very complex issues such as air and water quality, crime, and being able to live here, being able to afford to live here. I think the council clearly needs to set benchmarks on air and water quality so that we can determine whether we're deteriorating or we're improving. The next This is hard. Crime is another major aspect. We need not only to address law enforcement needs, but we need to look at the broader picture of youth issues and opportunities for productive youth activities. Taxes, people are worried about being priced out of their home. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison.
It's a fast one.
Mr. Case.
I think any city has to deal with the basics. By that I mean police, fire, roads, and public health. If we do not deal with those issues up front and well, then we preempt our ability to deal with other issues. I think the city is doing a good job in these areas. The next area globally is growth. That is the cause of lots of our other problems. Open space, air and water pollution, urban sprawl, transportation problems, affordable housing. and maintaining the qualities that we want to maintain so that we can continue to live here in Missoula. I think what a mayor has to do is work to anticipate those problems and develop through a consensus process and working with the various interest groups in the community, develop solutions to those problems and then get those solutions implemented. I think the growth management process, transportation planning, and developing neighborhood networks are all concrete things that we need to continue to follow through on. Finally, I think the mayor needs to be a central figure in developing communication and keeping communication with the community.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson, what are the 3 most important issues facing Missoula?
It's difficult to pin them down to 3, but what I have listed is crime and youth violence is the first 2, and they're quite related. I think we need to have more of the interaction with the police department and the local neighborhood level, more neighborhood watch, and that type of thing on it will help. The next is growth, and I think one of the best ways of controlling growth now is to see that we have no unzoned property in the city. As soon as any property is annexed to the city, it should be zoned, and I think that will make a big step towards control of growth.
Thank you. Mr. Sweet.
Well, I think we're at a very critical time in Missoula's history. We're at a crossroads. We face some very profound change. In 25 years, we may be a city of 125,000 people. And we see that change most clearly today in the areas of housing, transportation, and land use. And as mayor, I would work very, very hard to implement growth management tools. I would work for the creation of a housing plan for Missoula and an office of housing for the city of Missoula. I would implement the recommendations of our subcommittee on affordable housing. In the areas of transportation, I think we have to make those decisions locally because they affect us locally. We have to have an integration of various modes of transportation, and transportation has to be neighborhood friendly. Those are the 3 areas that I think are the most critical.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Badenoch, what are the 3 most important issues facing Missoula?
These people took all the good answers. I think the 3 most important issues have been touched on by, I think, throughout all the candidates. I think growth management is a critical issue right now. The city and the county have done a lot of good work in that area, but it needs to be followed through. Another area, of course, is the environment. We have to continue our vigilance on air and water quality. The 3rd most important issue right now that I think we need strong leadership in is in fiscal administration of the city. I'm part of the city's budget team, and we spent several hours today wrestling with some of the issues that arose out of our discovery that our revenue projections were not as, they were too optimistic. And that is the kind of attention that as mayor I would bring to it. I would make sure that we looked at those things so we didn't have to deal with those issues this late in the budget game.
Thank you. On to our next question. Give us a specific example of an incident that demonstrates your leadership and problem-solving ability. And this time we'll begin with you, Ms. Cass.
Thank you. For well over a year, I worked on various committees for both city and county rewriting the Fort Missoula plan. As the planning board president, I didn't feel it was appropriate to chair the steering committee, but I did accept chairmanship of the Historic District Overlay Subcommittee. I was able to work with both development and the Mental Health Center and those persons wanting to preserve the existing buildings, notably the barn, which was going to be demolished, and the remains of the internment camp. It was a difficult task, but in the end, an acceptable compromise was reached, which assured the developers of the ability to use their land and the preservationists of some control over the type of building that could occur. Both city and county adopted an historic overlay for the property, which remains in force today and would need to be considered for any development on the property, which is on the National Register of Historic Places.
Thank you. Mr. Charney.
There's many examples I could give you when I was mayor of Juneau, but one that comes to mind is that immediately after my term of mayor in Juneau was that the municipal governments of Alaska were allowed to go to unionize. And in that, a labor relations committee was formed in Juneau with the management or the city leadership appointing one member and the employees appointing another member. Those two members had to agree on a third member as chairman of the Labor Relations Committee, and I was the first candidate selected as chairman of the General Labor Relations Committee by both sides. And in that position, I authored many unanimous decisions in getting unionized municipal employees initiated. And I was acceptable to both sides and was able to author unanimous decisions voted on by everybody.
Thank you. Mr. Harrison, a specific example of your leadership in problem solving?
I've demonstrated leadership many times on the council. Two specific areas were with Vision 2020 and the growth management process. While my support and active participation on these issues were not well received by many of my constituents, I believe that these two areas will prove to benefit this community in the long run if they are utilized properly. One example of my problem-solving abilities actually dealt with the growth management area. One of the challenges of this particular process was that to bring everybody to the table. There's a good number of groups that think that this type of process is a waste of time and a waste of money. I was able to bring a good number of those folks to that table, which was no small chore. In light of this, I'll add that my personal credibility is at stake if this process fails or ends up being unfair in its implementation. And so the success of this process is very important to me.
Thank you. Mr. Case.
In 1988, Montana's system of funding education was ruled unconstitutional. I played a key role in getting that back on constitutional ground. It was an extremely complex issue, $600 million a year, at least 15 different revenue sources, at least 15 different expenditure funds, and very politically charged. Lots of powerful interest groups, from taxpayers and oil generators to the education community. I was able, working in a bipartisan way and independently, sometimes against my own party, to develop a number of measures that were used to finally bring the state into constitutional compliance. Things like spending caps, regression analysis to set budgetary levels, and the guarantees tax-based mechanism were all things that I worked out or helped bring to the front and became viable parts of the solution.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson, an example, please, of your leadership and problem-solving ability.
In the middle 80s, when I became chairman of the Finance Committee on the council, the city of Missoula was facing about a $3 million deficit in delinquent SIDs. We had numerous developers that had gone bankrupt. We had lands that had streets and sewers and stuff on them that were in a bankruptcy procedure. Through my efforts, Chuck Stern's efforts, Mayor Lovegrove efforts, we set up a situation where we managed to take over a lot of those properties, sell them. We did not default on any of the SIDs. We used the revolving fund. We used extra general fund monies. We put extra millage into the revolving fund. And in a period of about 5 to 7 years, we wiped out that deficit, and the city is in good financial condition now. We have no delinquent SIDs.
Thank you. Mr. Sweet.
Well, I think leadership comes in many forms, and one incident that comes to mind where I thought I showed some leadership and I don't think it was very popular was when I referred the family definition back to committee after it had gone down to defeat here in these chambers. I felt that the solution was not an adequate solution. It did not address the concerns of a great, I guess you could say a large minority of our community. It was not a kind of a solution. The problem didn't call for a win or lose, winner take all type of solution. It called for a better solution, so I re-referred it. I think in that sense that shows some leadership and a desire to keep an issue like that alive until we can come up with a solution that will solve the problem, not just for some people, but for all of us in our community. So I think that is a sign of leadership, and I think even something as small as appointing someone like Jim McGrath to head up our housing subcommittee, it was a good choice at a good time.
Thank you. Mr. Batten, example of your leadership and problem solving.
About
2 years ago, I joined a pool of candidates about 3 times the size of this panel and ran for the Local Government Study Commission. After about 18 months of cooperative work with my fellow commissioners, where we analyzed the government, we researched the local government, listened to citizens, and working together, we drafted a charter for the city of Missoula. That work was ratified about 45 days ago. It's the most recent example of what the citizens of Missoula want by way of government. My participation in that effort, I can't claim that I was the leader, but I believe that I made a valuable contribution to the effort, both in drafting the charter and sorting out the issues. And I would cite that as my example of being able to work with people and lead through cooperation.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Ballas.
About 2 years ago, when the city passed the fire station bond issue and I was selected to be the project architect on it, one of the sites that was chosen for the headquarters station was down along Rattlesnake Creek in a very dilapidated site right between the historic district. And as the project architect, I had to lead the design team that included the fire department and ourselves and engineers. And very early on, we recognized that we needed some very close cooperation and input from the citizens if the project was to ever be successful. We set up a number of public meetings. We got as much public input as we can. And I think we ended up with a very successful fire station in improving a dilapidated area. And just a couple of months ago, we received the award for the Historic Preservation Society for building a new building that was compatible with the historic district.
Thank you. We'll now move to the second portion of the forum. City Council members will now have an opportunity to ask spontaneous questions. We'll begin with you, Mr. Sponseller. And Mr. Charney, you will be the first to respond to Mr. Sponseller's question.
Thank you, Ms. Maxon. As you may well know, candidates for mayor, the mayor's position has discretionary spending powers, and as well, you'll be responsible for formulating a executive budget proposal. I'd like you to speak to the issue of conflict of interest, if you would, and let us know what you would do about organizations, businesses, and jobs that you may represent in terms of conflict of interest, and how you'd handle that.
Being a newcomer to Missoula and just qualifying for this position, as a matter of fact, by being here for over 3 years, I really don't have a conflict of interest here in Fairbanks. I'm in Missoula. I'm retired. I do not have employment elsewhere. I do not receive any income in Montana. I do have some rental income property or financed property from my previous home in Alaska and previous recreation property in Alaska, which I'm financing from the current owners. And besides my retirement, my Social Security, and that financial income from Alaska, I don't have any income in Montana. I don't foresee any conflict of interest in carrying out the duties of mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Harrison.
Okay, on the issue of conflict of interest, I think it's very clear that anytime you have a conflict of interest, you should remove yourself from that situation. You should make that conflict known, remove yourself from that situation. The mayor's office, at least in the city of Missoula, is a full-time position. I'd be surprised if anybody had a job outside of that job, because I think they will take many, many hours. I think many of the staff work a good 60 hours a week, from what I understand, at least the department heads and many more of the staff. So I think the rules on conflict of interest are very clear. You remove yourself, you make your conflict known, and remove yourself.
Thank you. Mr. Gates.
I am not aware of any conflicts of interest that I would have currently with the job as mayor. I do think that one of the standard ways of dealing with conflict of interest is if the conflict is, or if the issue deals with a class of people and you find yourself part of that class, then it's not generally considered a conflict of interest. It is when you receive specific direct benefit because of the particular issue, as opposed to being a class of people that would receive benefit. And I think that it's a very difficult issue, but I think that is one fairly decent way of drawing the line. I would also, if the issue were raised with regard to anything that I had or property that I held, which I don't hold much, then I would certainly be responsive to looking into that and responding to the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson, conflict of interest in the executive budget.
The first part of the discussion was regarding discretionary spending, and I don't think the mayor has any authority to make any discretionary spending other than what is specifically allowed by the council. On the conflict of interest, I don't think I would have a conflict of interest, but if I did, I would declare it and step aside and have the president of the council handle whatever meetings was to come under that order.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker.
Well, I don't believe I have any conflicts of interest right now. My business doesn't do any business at all with the city, nor would I ever imagine it doing any in the immediate future, at least. And I don't see where that would be a problem.
Thank you. Mr. Badenoch, the executive budget and conflict of interest.
Since I became director of the redevelopment agency in 1985, I prepared a departmental budget for the city each and every year. This year, I was on the city's budget team, which gave me the opportunity to review each and every department's budget. As to the question of conflict of interest, I do not have a business or any business interest that would do business with the city. I have no relatives here in Missoula that do business, that would do business with the city. And so I don't see that there would be a conflict. The only other thing I can imagine is that I'm a member of the board of directors of Missoula Federal Credit Union, which is the city's employees credit union. And if I were elected mayor, I would resign from that board.
Thank you. Mr. Ballas.
Since I'm not part of the current city circle in government, I really have no direct knowledge of the executive budget and exactly how it is used. My intent is to confer very heavily with Mayor Kemmis and with his, what I think is a very qualified director and finance manager to resolve any of those issues. As far as conflict of interest, I think we need to avoid even the very appearance of a conflict of interest to gain as much public support as we can. My firm right now does have a contract that we are finishing up. I have no intention of pursuing any other contracts. We would make that known. I also have the intention of hiring an independent architect to run my business during the time frame.
Thank you. I don't believe that I have any conflicts that would come up. The only thing I could possibly think of was the fact that the city does fund Missoula Aging Services to a degree, and I serve on their governing board. I would expect that if appointed mayor, I would have to step down from that board.
Well, mayors, for all their trying, don't always inspire unanimity. How would you relate to opposition? Opposition that might crop up in the council, opposition that might crop up in the city staff?
I think that's a very good question. I think one of the strengths that I would bring to this position is I get along pretty well with everyone. I've been on the council now 10.5 years. I've always been in the minority party. Matter of fact, I think at the most there's only been 3 Republicans out of 12 members of this council. For 2 years I was president of the city council, so that shows that I have the ability to work with people. My current job in Mountain Water really deals with public relations and how do you get people together. And I think it's extremely important to bring people together. And on issues as complex as what this city faces, everyone's input is needed. There needs to be a balance. I think the key to running a city or any governmental entity is to have a balance and pull from every sector, because you can't maintain long-term success if you don't.
Thank you. Mr. Cadis.
Well, if you notice the last election returns in last fall, I have been working in the minority party as well. I've also had the opportunity to work in the majority party. I think that I base my relationships on respect, mutual respect. I try to work hard and listen well, and I think that I've been fairly successful in being able to work both sides of the aisle in Helena and work on problems that face the state of Montana and developed a good reputation there. I hope, and I think that's one of the things that I can bring to City Hall, and I think it would be a benefit for the process here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson.
I think I generally get along with most people fairly well. I formed quite a bit of consensus when I was president of the council. Most of the work we did was unanimous or close to it. I think by listening to all sides and trying to find some middle ground, I think that works. I've had quite a bit of experience in negotiating from the labor standpoint. I've had quite a bit of experience in lobbying in Helena, and I think that all ties in together.
Mr. Sweet, how would you relate to opposition on city staff or on the council?
Well, I think that you should always expect some opposition, that we're not always going to reach consensus and be happy about everything. I think that's just part of life. And I don't mind that at all, provided that we've had a good airing out of the issues and the ideas, and we've had a good, intelligent discussion, that if there's opposition, there's opposition. However, I think, the mayor's role is one of staying a little bit above the fray, working to help bring community and council together to craft solutions that are win-win solutions. And I think that would be what I would try to do as the mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Badenoch?
Well, I think Craig gave a real good answer, and I think that is kind of the answer that I would give. There is going to be conflict, there is going to be opposition. It's in a lot of ways it's healthy. It's how we get ideas and synergy going. But I think Craig's hit it on the head. The idea is not to foment the controversy, it's not to encourage the opposition, but to work it through to its ultimate conclusion, where you can get to a point where you can still maintain respect, both with the staff and among the council. Certainly the council doesn't agree with each other all the time. But the idea has got to be to work towards a solution, to work towards a conclusion, so that whatever the process is that you're involved in, you can move on with a decision.
Thank you. Mr. Fallis?
I think the successful way to handle conflict is to be a good listener and to be patient, to respect people. If you respect people, generally they will respect you back, even though that you may have differences of opinion. We have prepared many plans for school districts over the years, and you always run into people that do not want increases in taxes or object to one thing and another. And the best way we resolve that is to listen to them, let them speak their piece, and then try to come up with solutions and responses to their concerns. Everybody's concern is important and needs to be heard.
Thank you. Ms. Cass, how would you relate to opposition?
I think listening is very important. I also think it's important to get past the emotionalism of the opposition. And I think another thing that's very important is to start with what you agree together on and work from there. Because often the differences are big emotional blocks, but very small rational blocks.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Sharp.
I've held both partisan and nonpartisan positions in my career. Partisan positions have been state budget director and the mayor of Juneau. And I have gone through this opposition many times. Major nonpartisan position I held was the executive director of the Alaska legislature. I worked for a Republican-controlled legislature at times, a Democratic-controlled legislature at times, and we always had at least one or two libertarians in our legislature as well. And when I retired from that position after 9 years, I received commendation from the entire legislature. I'm also an advocate of the debate team, debates procedure. Many times I will play devil's advocate. Give me 5 minutes notice and I'll argue both either side of the question you tell me to argue, just to feel everybody out in order to get the answers. And hopefully when we do come to a conclusion, everybody will feel better about it because we've argued the case out in good form.
Thank you. Mr. Reedy, you have the next question. And Mr. Cadis, you will be the first to answer.
Yes, please state your administrative.
I've been a member of the legislature for 14 years. I'm currently the chairman of the Finance Committee, which directs our fiscal staff for the legislature. I have worked closely with a number of budget directors and fiscal analysts. I've worked closely with the spectrum of legislative staff over those 14 years. I've also run my own small business. I'm a carpenter, and while we don't make a lot of money, we have stayed afloat. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson.
I was on the fire department for 30 years, and the last 6 years of that in administrative capacities. I was the training officer as the assistant fire chief and fire chief. We handled the budgets for that period of time. Then I was city council for 12 years, 6 of those years president of the council, and that gave me quite a bit of administrative experience there. I was also the board of directors of the Missoula Federal Credit Union, chairman of the board for several years, and was on the board in the period of time that went from a $6 million credit union to an $80 million credit union.
Thank you. Mr. Sweet, please explain your administrative experience.
Back in 1979, I was a project administrator with Youth Conservation Corps in Boston. It was a inter-city, interracial program. We had 5 projects going in 4 different cities around Boston, and my duties were working with the staff that we hired and with the YCC employees, making sure that the projects came in on budget, that they had their materials, and that later went on to be involved in college admissions. I served with 2 different colleges in admissions capacity, hiring and training recruiters, putting together recruiting budgets and recruiting plans for around New England area. And most recently, I've been involved in management at a local business here in town where I was responsible for training and hiring and also a rather sizable budget that I and sales goals that I had to meet, and I had to solve employee problems and things like that.
Mr. Badnoff.
The bulk of my administrative experience has been as a city department head, where I've had to manage the staff and operation of the Missoula Redevelopment Agency. Some of the work that I had to do there, Jack, involved project management from projects that ranged from the parking structure to parks to sewer projects and so on. I've also, in that capacity, served on a number of city committees and task forces and so on. Like Al, I've also served on the Missoula Federal Credit Union, which I mentioned before. And if you dig way, way back in my past, you'll see that I spent, like Craig, several years in college-level student personnel administration.
Thank you. Mr. Vallis?
My entire background has really been in the small business community. I've been in business for 25 years, and I've actually operated and managed my business for 20 years. And during those 20 years, 25 years, that anybody that has lived here, you know that Missoula's economy and growth has gone up and down like a roller coaster sometimes. And so we've had to manage a business and supervise employees and make payrolls and borrow money from banks and balance accounts through all types of projects. Also, as a project architect, I get involved in a number of very large construction projects that are of interest, and some of those have been things like the construction of the Washington Grizzlies Stadium, the construction of Big Sky High School, construction of Frenchtown, all of which involve management and overseeing and supervision of major contracts.
Thank you. Ms. Cass, your administrative experience.
I currently serve on 4 nonprofit boards and the Missoula Consolidated Planning Board. At one time, I was the chairman of the planning board and served on the planning policy committee and the policy coordinating committee, and was the chair of both of those committees. I was the first administrator of the Joseph residence here in Missoula. I was a crew leader for the U.S. Census and service learning program coordinator for Missoula County Public Schools as a consultant.
Thank you. Mr. Charney.
A week after graduating from high school, I went to work for the Minnesota Highway Department. 14 years later, with time out for service time that I spent during the Korean War, I left the Minnesota Highway Department at the position of Assistant Finance Director and entered into a nationwide competitive examination for Finance Officer for the State of Alaska Highway Department, and was selected after passing the examination and being interviewed. 2 years later, I was appointed, when I left the classified service and became appointed by the governor as Administrative Director of the Department of Highways. On many occasions, we had 4 directors under the commissioner, and on many occasions I served as acting commissioner. And then from there, we changed governors. I went to become the mayor of Juneau, state budget director, executive director of the legislature, et cetera.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Harrison, your administrative experience.
Okay, currently I hold an administrative position with a major utility here in Missoula. In addition to personnel, supervision, risk management, and public relations, I help develop and administer a budget of approximately $8 million. My wife, Rosemary, has also owned and ran a small business here for over 13 years in the Missoula area. I'm familiar with the administration of both large and small businesses here in Missoula, and I understand what it's like to stay within a budget. There's a real difference between administering a budget and setting a budget.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson, you have the next question. And Mr. Sampson, you will be the first person to answer Mr. Anderson's question.
Well, many of these issues will be set by the time the person that's selected as mayor will take office. There will be much administration left to do, in the area that concerns me greatly is the area of personnel management. I would like you to relate your experience in relations to salary and wage administration, benefit management, contract negotiation, grievance settlement, and also the area of risk management, which are all a part of the mayor's duties here.
I've been active all of my life in the government and fire department. I was very active in the union level in the fire department, attended many seminars. In fact, was instructed one seminar on labor negotiations. I've I think had a pretty wide amount of experience in regarding wages, the fringe benefit packages, and the health and welfare situation. I've sat as a negotiator for the firemen in Missoula. I've sat as a negotiator as firemen for firemen out of Missoula also. I have sat on the negotiating team for the city of Missoula against the firemen. I have probably got a pretty wide experience from the standpoint of labor negotiations on it. I'm quite familiar with the personnel.
Thank you, Mr. Sampson. Mr. Sweet, your personnel management experience.
Larry, I would say that I'm pretty familiar with most recent labor negotiations as they involve city and city employees. Beyond that, I have served in a role of supervisor of as many as 15 employees in various capacities in the last probably 10 or 15 years. Primarily, I've had to hire those people, fire those people, set their salaries and their wages. I've had to train those people. I've had to resolve their conflicts. It isn't the same as supervising a staff of 300 people, but I think the types of skills you learn, the interpersonal skills you learn, are just as important and would serve just as well, whether it was 300 people I was supervising or 15.
Thank you. Mr. Badenoch.
Larry, I'll be quite honest with you up front. Of all the things that you mentioned, I think my experience in labor contract negotiation is probably a place where I don't have a great deal of experience. However, in my university coursework, I did do quite a bit of coursework in that area. With respect to recruitment, I've had to do all the hiring and recruitment for people of the MRA, as well as recruitment for the Missoula Federal Credit Union CAOs, CEOs. I've also been part of the city's recruitment for some of the higher level department head positions here. I've been on the city's grievance committee and heard grievances from employees. I was a standing member of the employee reclassification committee for several years here at the city. And I've got quite a bit of experience in the area of personnel policy development.
Thank you. Mr. Ballas, your personnel management experience.
Again, Larry, my experience has primarily been as a small business person, where you have to be a jack of all trades and do just about everything, from hiring people to setting salaries to managing budgets. In construction contracts, we have to manage and interpret many large construction contracts, but it seems to get to the point where the mayor is going to be almost a Superman, where he's got to be a little bit of everything, and maybe he does, but he also has the ability of hiring and retaining some very competent staff. And I think that's been the mark and trait of Mayor Camus right now. I guess it would be my intent. I think he has a good basic staff in his CAO. He relies very heavily on the support that he gains from his staff and his CAO and his finance manager.
Thank you. Ms. Cass.
My personnel experience is not extensive. I have supervised people in retail. I have supervised a crew of census takers and trained them. I have also been involved in a couple of personnel issues with what was then the planning office, is now the Office of Planning and Grants. And I certainly believe that it's an area where I will be able to grow and learn some of those skills.
Thank you. Mr. Charney.
As previously mentioned, I have been chairman of the Labor Relations Committee. I've been at the negotiating table representing both sides, both management and labor, at different occasions. And I've managed personnel or human resources divisions. I've managed risk management division at different municipalities. And I've costed out benefit packages, worked with benefit packages. They've been discussed, of course, at the negotiations that I was involved in. And I have established, I think on 3 occasions, grievance procedures.
Thank you. Mr. Harrison, your personnel management experience.
Okay, the areas that I have specific experience in are recruitment, hiring, firing, training. I know quite a bit about wrongful discharge, but we've been lucky we've never done that. So setting salaries and wages, benefits such as insurance, 401k, retirements, long-term, short-term disability, and workers' comp. Those are the areas I work primarily in. I'm probably the weakest in labor negotiations. I'd like to say one thing on this area, though. I think it's easy to be swallowed up in a city this size in any particular department, and personnel issues alone could take most of the mayor's time. So I think it's very important how you utilize the department heads, specifically the personnel director and the chief administrative officer. I think it's important that you use those to the very best you can.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Case.
I've been involved in, for at least the last 8 years, actively in the state implementation and development of pay plans, including developing the pay matrix, the classification system, wage and salary surveys. And while the legislature doesn't necessarily negotiate with the unions on pay plan packages, When the governor fails to do so, then it's forced into the hands of the legislature, and so I've been in that seat a couple of times, occasionally earning the wrath of even my own caucus for being active there. I've also contributed and was a direct participant in the last round of negotiations with the University of Montana for the university faculty in a fairly creative process that was initiated by the Board of Regents and the union itself. I think they came up with a pretty good package by including both legislative people and the governor, and I hope I can bring some of that experience to the city.
Thank you. Now we'll move to the other side of the room, and Ms. Crowley, you'll have the last question in this segment of the forum. And you will, Mr. Sweet, you will be the first to answer Ms. Crowley's question.
Good evening. Given the impact of the university's decisions on Missoula, what type of relationship do you plan on having with the university administration, and how would you involve the city council?
Well, I think we need to get more cooperation from the university. They're an awful big part of our community, and I think there are times when they act as if they are not a part of our community. And I think it would be very important to try to build a good relationship with them, and as mayor, that's what I would strive to do. And hopefully lead them to see that they have a role, that they are playing a role in our community, and that they have severe impacts on what happens in terms of housing and transportation, in terms of how we view some of our non-motorized transportation plans, for example, and how they fit in. So I think it's a matter of getting to know them getting to know me. As far as the council goes, we have been meeting on a quarterly basis for lunch with the university. I think we could do more. We could invite them to more of our meetings, to meet with the committee of the whole, to talk about our concerns with them on a more informal basis.
Thank you, Mr. Sweet. Mr. Badenoch.
Well, clearly, the university is a massive presence in our community. It's part of what shapes Missoula. As Craig said, the city presently conducts quarterly meetings with the university. I think those meetings could be more productive, more than just simple information sharing. I think that they could probably narrow the agendas and have them be more work sessions. I think that we have to recognize that we do form a partnership with the university. We have done that on several occasions with the non-motorized transportation plan. They were a very willing and helpful partner. The examples are there for successful partnerships with the university, and we're going to get a lot more done with the university as our partner than as our foe.
Thank you. Mr. Ballas, what should the relationship be with the university?
It goes without saying that the university is a major part of Missoula. It's one of our major employees, and they also are a major resource for all of the information, or a lot of the information and activities that go on in Missoula. I think it's very important that we maintain good, strong relationships. I think the mayor can take an active part of that. In fact, maybe having a former mayor working with the university, maybe that's an insight, the foot in the door, another one. I think it's important that the mayor also contacts with the President Dennison and establishes a good dialogue because from the head of the university, it's a many-headed creature, but from that head comes directions to all the other departments.
Thank you. Ms. Cass.
If I were appointed mayor, I would make a very strong effort to develop a warm relationship with the university. I think the university has many things to offer this community, just as this community supports the university. I believe that with the building that's going on at the university, with the expertise that's on the campus, we really need to work hand in hand. And I would encourage that strongly throughout my term.
Thank you. Mr. Charney.
Yeah, I'm not going to kid anybody. I'm not familiar with the relationship cities had with the university in the past. But in the future, I would suggest a very strong working relationship with the university. I don't know whether the city offers internships of university students with the city, but that's one alternative that could be done if it doesn't already. In Alaska, we use the university for a lot of basic research, both at the state level and at the municipal level, and at the highway department level. They did a tremendous amount of research on permafrost in Alaska for the highway department, and close cooperation with the major employer in this area, as well as all other employers in this area, is essential.
Thank you. Mr. Harrison.
Well, I feel like our relationship with the university is very good, and I think we should work to continue that relationship. I think it's incumbent upon the city that we recognize the challenges that the university faces. Their problems are no less complex than the ones we face, and sometimes I think we get a little impatient with entities outside ourselves, and I think it's important that we continue that good relationship with them. We have utilized interns. We have worked together several times. We've done this quarterly luncheon, and I think our relationship is very good with the university.
Thank you. Mr. Cadis.
I spent the last 8 years as a member of the Education Subcommittee in the legislature, which is a 6-person committee that oversees the funding of the university system. As a consequence, I've become very familiar with both the processes and the components and the personnel of the university system. I think I know, in the case of where there are problems, I know who to go talk to, and I think I have good access to those people. In some ways, I think we have to think of the university as an 800-pound gorilla in this community. If we do not pay attention to what they're doing, do not make the effort to go and work with the university, they're going to go ahead and do the things they think they need to do, and they'll do them whether we agree with it or not. We need to be active in our association with them. They are very cooperative if we make the effort to be there, and I'll do that. I also think that it is important to nurture the relationship. The University of Montana is one of the most critical essences of the community of Missoula. Many people live here because of the University of Montana.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Sampson.
I think we presently have a good working relationship with the university, and I think we should continue that and attempt to better it. Even we have the quarterly meetings with the university where we discuss mutual problems. The city of Missoula furnishes the fire protection to the university system. They furnish all but the basic police situation out there. I think there's a lot of areas for cooperation, and I think we can even do more on cooperation. We presently do some of the interns with the university, and I think we should do more of that.
Thank you. Now we will have approximately 10-minute follow-up dialogue among the applicants. Each applicant will be allowed to speak twice for 30 seconds each time. Applicants may use this opportunity to clarify any of their previous answers, comment on what other applicants may have said this evening, or ask other applicants questions. Please raise your hand and I will recognize you. Mr. Cadis.
I feel that I have a certain obligation to reveal my vacation plans here. They have been in the works for quite a while. Tonight, the rest of my family is leaving for 2 family reunions, 2 weddings, and 2 small boys. And I feel an obligation. I need to catch up with them as soon as I can after Monday night and be with them, particularly to make sure that Martha has some help with the 2 small boys. As a consequence, I'm going to be out of town for a good part of the month. And I don't think that will hurt my ability to make a smooth transition. I'm good friends with Mayor Kemmis. I'll be in contact, and Mayor Kemmis is only a phone call away.
Thank you. Mr. Harrison.
Where will you be going home? Maybe I'll bring it back to something more serious. So we can comment on anything that, or clarify whatever. In our 3 major issues, where we had a minute to tell what 3 major issues were and what we do about them. I mentioned taxes as being the 3rd one, but I just, a very brief statement, I feel it's incumbent upon the city that we utilize every tax dollar to its maximum benefit, because just because if we don't, our credibility goes down and we really get hurt on the issues that we really want.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Charney?
Just to clarify on what I said, a new budgeting system, I think too many people in the community now talk about full-time employees, how many full-time employees are budgeted, how many supplies, how much commodities, et cetera, are budgeted. What I'm trying to get to is that we will have measures in a budgeting system so that the people will know when they're, for instance, their tax dollar that goes to a fire department, what the average response time is. Is that acceptable to them? Do they want higher? Do they want lower?
Thank you. Mr. Ballas?
I guess I'd like to maybe comment and expand on the question on leadership. And part of leadership not only involves what an individual does, it also involves how an individual uses and reacts with the staff and the resources that he has. And Mayor Camus has indicated that one of the reasons that he announced early is he wanted to give time to work with somebody new in it. And I think it's important that we take advantage of that time to be able to carry on his programs.
Thank you. Mr. Badnock?
I wanted to expand a little bit on the topic that was just raised and having to do with transition, and remind the council who were here at the time, and maybe those of you who are new to the council recall that there was a 3-month period at the beginning of 1993 when Mayor Camus asked me to serve as the city's interim CAO, and that's an experience I didn't get to tell you about.
Thank you. You are allowed to speak twice. Mr. Cadis?
I would like to expand on my response to Mr. Morgan's question regarding opposition and how I deal with that. I think it is inevitable that there will be circumstances where consensus does not ultimately prevail. In those circumstances, I think it's important that we encourage and allow for passion to be a part of the discussion. What is more important than that, though, is that after that passion, after we've heard it, we are able to let that go and move on to the next issue and not carry animosity with us to the next issue.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, if not, we will return to the prepared questions now. And Mr. Badnock, you will be the first to respond to this question. What do you want the Missoula urban area to look like in 10 years?
I'd like the Missoula urban area to be a principal color green. I think we need to continually work on planting green spaces and cultivating those, both in our parks, our street trees. One of the things I'm proudest of that the MRA has done over the years is plant our downtown street trees, where we've softened the concrete by planting almost 600 trees. When they were first planted, they looked like twigs and saplings, and some of them are ready to be clear cut. Although I would lay my body before the axe of anybody who tried to cut down one of our street trees.
Thank you. Mr. Ballas?
When I think of the future in the 10 years, the first thing I think of is the people that are going to be growing up and entering the active community at that time. And I think we have to remember that those kids right now are kids in middle schools, that in 10 years they're going to be completing their education. Hopefully that will be at the University of Montana, and they will be entering the job market. I guess my goal is to see that they hopefully that they have a good, meaningful job that pays enough so that they can buy an affordable house. I envision a strong CBD. I envision good, clear neighborhoods that are friendly and safe. And I envision a good series of arterials that are greenways and comfortable to drive on as we enter the city.
Thank you. want the Missoula urban area to look like in 10 years?
In 10 years, I believe I'm going to see a small city surrounded by open space. We've been working on getting the sky blue again instead of gray. I want clean water to flow underneath and through the city. I want to see happy children playing in our parks and grandparents taking their evening walk around the block without fear. I want to see families spending time together and not letting kids raise themselves because dad's gone and mom has to work 2 jobs. People will be extending helping hands to neighbors and respecting other people's point of view. Businesses will be prospering, streets will be less crowded because our bus system will be convenient to use and cheaper than feeding a meter. And tourists will come here not just because we're between Glacier and Yellowstone, but because we're a vibrant community full of friendly people with something for everyone.
Thank you. Mr. Charney.
I'd like to see Missoula be a city that is conducive to good-paying jobs for the community, a vital downtown area, a somewhat reduction of urban sprawl, and a stronger university, and just a nice and safe place to live.
Thank you. Mr. Harrison.
I'd like to see a Missoula urban area that's clean and uncongested, a city where people can afford to live and to work. I'd like to see a community where opportunities for employment were abundant and that our children could stay here if they so chose to do so. I'd like to see the growth that we'll experience somewhat hidden in our neighborhoods, safe places to live where people are not afraid for themselves, for their children, or for their property. I'd like to see a community that we truly utilize the resources that we have entrusted to us and not waste any resources. I would like to see a place where it was a friendly, healthy place where both educational and recreational opportunities were abundant.
Thank you. Mr. Case.
I'd like Missoula to be a place of clean streets lined by a diversity of trees, used by a variety of transportation mechanisms, clean air and water, places for children and adults to both play and ponder. I think we need a vibrant university and a spirit that acknowledges the place and its people. And by that I mean, as an example, when I first came to Missoula, I was struck by the fact that it was one of the very few places I'd ever been where I could walk down the street as a stranger and get a smile from just about everybody I passed. Missoula is still that kind of a place. We need to continue that spirit.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson, what do you want the Missoula urban area to look like in 10 years?
I would hope that in 10 years the urban area looks a great deal like it does now. I would like to see some of the infill here, but I would like to see as we expand, I would like to see more of the open space park type thing where there are playgrounds, where there are ball fields and so on and so forth. I don't want to just protect the view shed. I want to be able to have people to interact as a neighborhood with the parks and so on and so forth. I want to make it so that it's safe for people to walk around. I know right now there's a lot of people from out of town that are amazed that they feel safe coming, visiting Missoula and walking several blocks around Missoula without fear of being mugged or whatever.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Sweet.
Well, when I first came to Missoula, I was really struck by the fact that you didn't need a lot of money to live in Missoula. And I think that's disappearing. When I proposed a living wage, we heard a lot of economists say, well, gee, a living wage like that, if businesses have to pay that kind of money, it'll drive them out of our community. And these are the same economists that said our kids are leaving our community because they can't find a decent job to make a living. So I would like to see a Missoula where people can make a living and people can live in a variety of housing they can afford. I'd like to see better integration of our transportation, different modes of transportation. I'd like to see safer and quieter neighborhoods. And I think we need to come to grips with our concerns about infill development. And I think we will do that. I'd like to see us update our riverfront plan. I think it needs to be updated. And I'd like to see the city of Missoula own the champion land so it can be developed in the way we would like to see it developed.
Thank you. For this next question, we'll begin with Mr. Ballas. What should the role of staff be in policymaking?
As I know with our current city charter, that the council is actually the body that establishes policy. The staff I envision as being the professional people that help the council develop policy. The staff is to provide the research, the options, and make recommendations for the council to act on. And then once the council has made those decisions, then it is up to the staff to implement the policy. And that policy needs to be implemented and worked through the CAO. You can only work for one head at any one time, and I think there needs to be a clean line of authority and direction for the staff so that they aren't working for multiple people.
Thank you. Ms. Cass.
Our city staff is hired because they bring expertise and experience that the policymakers need to be informed of. I believe their role is advisory. Our government is set up so that the city council makes policy decisions, and until the time that our government changes, I feel that's the way it should be. Council members know this is their responsibility when they run for office, and I believe they are more than willing to take that responsibility.
Thank you. Mr. Charney.
Okay, you have the two extremes on policy making. You have the overall policies established by the city council. Then you have the classified employees at the other end, which are advisory and policy only. The gray area becomes in the middle, where you have your program managers who are going to be establishing policy every single day under the broad guidelines of the policy established by the council. I feel that you have to ensure that those policies that they make on a day-to-day basis are within the guidelines established by the council, and the people that are in those positions, management positions that make that daily policy, should be subject to dismissal at will rather than classified employees.
Thank you. Mr. Harrison, what should the role of staff be in policymaking?
The role of the staff in policymaking should be an advisory role. Staff should offer all viable alternatives to any given situation and then offer their advice as to what they think would be the best way to go with a direction would be. But it's up to the city council to set policy. That's a very clear cut. There's a clear cut difference between administration and city council. The staff should not set the policy. I believe it's okay for staff to bring up issues if they see problems in their areas, but I think that should go to the city council. It should be discussed there, and the policy should be set there. And the staff is for services to the community, not policy.
Thank you. Mr. Cayes.
Staff needs to work for and at the request of the council and the mayor. Staff responsibilities, I think, focus around developing options and recommendations and then analysis of the consequences of those options and recommendations. I've worked with legislative and administrative staff for 16 years now. I've had many fruitful relationships, and that's what I hope to continue here in Missoula.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson.
I think staff should be an advisory position. They should be furnishing information to the council to establish the policy, because the council is the policy-making body. I think in addition to that, however, once the policy is established, the staff should write that policy out so it's understood, so that 2 years later, the city council isn't going through reestablishing the same policy because they can't find out what it was. The city council has spent a tremendous amount of time reestablishing policy because there was not a known policy in place on it. But the staff is only there for information on the policy and to implement the policy by that is established by the council.
Thank you. Mr. Sweet, what should be the role of staff in policymaking?
What I think I'm hearing is from some members up here is some confusion. I think you should be very clear that there's policy and there's process. Policy should come from the city council. The city council should determine what they want for outcomes and results, and that should be the basis for their policy. They should set very clear parameters for staff, but allow the staff to carry out the process by which that policy will come about and those results will be made. The other role of staff is to be reporting back to the council with information, with the data, so that the council can constantly be revising their policy and making sure that they're getting the outcomes and the results that they have desired. But I think where council runs into a problem is when they confuse the process with the policy. And we pay these people, they are paid experts. We should allow them to do their job.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Badenoch.
In the charter that the voters recently adopted, it's quite clear. It says specifically that the city council is the chief policy-making body of the city. There's no discussion about that. It's quite clear. The role of the staff in policy-making, I think, I've always believed that the secret to good policy-making isn't in laying out good answers, it's setting up good questions. And it's the staff's role to help the council formulate the good questions from which good policy can then follow. The staff should provide expertise, advice, analysis, and counsel to the council in their formulation of policy, and that is their role.
Thank you. Our next question is quite long. Next year's reappraisals could substantially increase the value of a city mill. If this is the case, would you favor lowering the mill levy in order to keep reappraisal revenue neutral, or would you favor maintaining the mill levy at current levels in order to generate additional revenue? And we'll begin with Ms. Katz.
This is a difficult question for me. On the one hand, I prefer not to increase the burden of taxation on our citizens. At present, I don't see any looming need that would require government to demand more of the taxpayers. On the other hand, I am concerned about the current level of our general fund and would like to see it back at levels we've had in the past. So I'd have to say that only after evaluating city needs, including whether the general fund is appropriate or not, I would make my recommendation. And under these conditions, I would suspect that the budget would allow us to lower the mill levy, but to what level I couldn't say.
Thank you. Mr. Charney.
The short answer is to lower the mill levy, hopefully to revenue neutral or even further. The longer answer is depending on what the council does with this year's budget that's going to take up in August, and what you're going to do with the makeup of the $500,000 that was taken out of the reserve a year ago. And if you ultimately have to increase the taxes to make up that reserve or that one-time reserves, then that'll have an effect on what happens the following year on the budget that will be presented by the acting mayor. And if you don't have to make up that $500,000, then I would assume that revenue would be neutral on an increased millage, on an increased assessment.
Thank you. Mr. Harrison.
I would suggest that we lower the mill levy in order to keep the reappraised revenue neutral. With the current needs of the city, that'd be difficult, but unless we do some streamlining, which I think is entirely possible. If we want to encourage our society to use more self-restraint, such as conservation or carpooling or any of the other many ideas that we have, we need to do the same with the taxpayers' money.
Thank you. Mr. Case.
Given recent revelations regarding the value of how much money is going to be coming in due to our millage, I wonder if this question wouldn't have been worded a little differently. I do believe that the first thing you have to focus on is the budget. I think that an upper bound for the budget has to be the base plus population and inflation growth. Since we're annexing areas into the city, we're going to have to increase services to deal with those. That's the upper bound. I think we ought to work hard to find efficiencies to go lower than that. And to the extent that the mill levy is higher because of appreciated value, we ought to be able to lower the mill levy to compensate for that.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson.
I think a budget should be established with a revenue neutral position for several different reasons. And one is that in all likelihood the legislature is going to do something about the situation of the increased value of property. All by a magic flip of their pen why they change the formula, and we may not have that money, and we may not know it until after we've established or done a preliminary budget on it. I don't believe that there would be any reason to do anything other than revenue neutral to begin with. But after you get into the budget, well, you may find that there's certain things that necessitate increasing it. As far as the $500,000, I think the cash surplus at the end of this year was higher than it was last year, so the $500,000 should not be an issue.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker.
I think there's always the possibility of many unknowns out there. I think on the surface, remaining revenue neutral is a prudent thing to do. However, I think you have to take a good hard look at the budget and what your needs are, what your current cash balances or projected cash balance might be, and also be looking ahead to potential pitfalls in the future, what the legislature may do next year or the year after, and take that into consideration. I always thought that being a fiscal conservative meant saving a little bit for those rainy days when you had a little bit extra, not giving it all away. So I would want to take a very close look at the budget before making a decision not to maintain the mill at the current level. But I think it's very prudent to leave it at least revenue neutral until you've had a good chance to look at all the potential outcomes of that choice.
Thank you. Mr. Badenoch.
Well, this is one of those questions that it's like when you stop beating your wife. It's very difficult to give an answer. As Al and Mike pointed out, the aim is not revenue neutrality. The aim is to start with the practical exercise of building a budget. Circumstances in the city change as needs change. Revenue neutrality may not be the goal that you're trying to accomplish. There's a great many variables, as Craig pointed out. And I think the first thing that we should try to do is ask why the mill has to be adjusted at all. And answering those questions gets you closer to the answer of whether you should strive for revenue neutrality or not. You need to get the job done.
Thank you. Mr. Ballas.
I think the city government, city council has to be very, very sensitive to taxpayer frustration. Taxpayer frustration is what has led to the Albright suit, which is a direct relationship to the frustration of paying more taxes because your house increased in value. We also have to be very sensitive to those that are on fixed incomes, Social Security and that type, that don't necessarily get more money if their taxes go up. So I would try to keep things revenue neutral, but I also think the city voted for an open space issue, and I think that the bond budget needs to be increased to carry that, to cover that voter-approved increase.
Thank you. At this time, we'll take a 10-minute break. Please return to your seats. I'm not going to figure this out in 10 minutes. And we'll begin with the second set of City Council questions. right here. I want to be like right there. How close? That's good. Maybe like this. Okay. So this is a little better. started. And thank you all for coming back. We'll begin this second half of the forum with the remainder of the City Council members' questions. Ms. Gingerelli, you will have the first question, and Mr. Charney, you will be the first to respond.
As you may or may not know, the City Council has been somewhat philosophically split on the issues of higher density zoning and commercial development in Missoula neighborhoods. My question is, should the City of Missoula pass ordinances that encourage mixed-use development, such as higher densities and commercial uses in neighborhoods, or allow neighborhoods themselves to initiate such changes?
I would think that you would wait until these neighborhood councils are formed and take their advice on specific neighborhoods. Personally, I'm not opposed to neighborhood commercial, and I know of zoning ordinances where they have different classifications of commercial, and some neighborhood commercial establishments like daycare centers and et cetera would be natural things to have in a specific neighborhood. Other commercial establishments might not be, but I would wait until the neighborhood councils were appointed and activated and take their advice.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. And I'd just like to remind everyone that they do need to put the microphones fairly close to their face.
Okay, I'm going to do better. In regards to the mixed-use aspect of commercial and residential together, I do believe that there's a way to implement the mixed-use aspect, especially in newer areas before they're built. I think that's a good way to design them. But I also think that in established neighborhoods have the right to maintain their integrity. And I believe that that's true for every established neighborhood in this community. I think if they would like mixed use, then I think that's up to that neighborhood. If they do not like mixed use, I think that's still up to that neighborhood. So I would say for new areas, I think it could be planned into the neighborhood.
Thank you. Mr. Cadis.
I would agree with much of what Doug said. I think that particularly for the older neighborhoods, which I think is where the conflict arises, the neighborhood has to be involved in the process and the decision. In general, I think that in terms of transportation in particular, it's something that we really need to look at hard, is encouraging mixed use. But I think that, again, neighborhoods have to be involved in that process.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson.
I'm in pretty well complete agreement with the last two people who spoke. The city zoning ordinances still need to be reworked in order to do some of the things that we're talking about. We spent a lot of money trying to get them reworked once, and it fell by the wayside. University, law school did some work on it, and I think that should probably be revised again on it. But mixed uses in new areas, yes. In the old established areas, it should be only done with the neighborhood. Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Sweet.
Well, yeah, I agree that it should be up to the neighborhood, but I think it's incumbent upon the City Council to give the neighborhood the necessary tools and the developers in our Office of Planning and Grants the necessary tools to do a good job of putting neighborhood commercial in those neighborhoods where neighborhoods desire it. And I'm thinking along the way of design standards and changing our zoning, the setbacks, landscape standards, et cetera, so that the neighborhood commercial would fit in. And I'm one of those who are a bit perplexed. I remember when a neighborhood, or when the corner grocery store was a darn good idea, and being able to go down and get a bottle of milk or a loaf of bread was a good idea, and I'm kind of wondering where it suddenly became a bad idea. And I think that's what we have to search for, is when did that become a bad idea, and how can we make it a good idea again? But again, I think it's incumbent upon the City Council. We have to mitigate 95% of the problems up front in our ordinance.
Thank you. Mr. Badnock.
Well, I think Craig hit it right on the head. I can imagine a commercial use in a residential neighborhood that probably 99.9% of the people in the neighborhood would accept and welcome. Including commercial in established residential neighborhoods is the tricky part. And I think that's where you do need to listen to the neighbors, the residents who live there, and invite them into the process of helping decide what that commercial development will look like. Standards of lighting, parking, architectural design, all of those issues will make the difference between a good commercial presence in a neighborhood and one that's bad. Like Craig, I grew up 2 blocks from a corner store, and our neighborhood wouldn't have been the same without it. And when it went out, the neighborhood changed.
Thank you. Mr. Ballas.
There's nothing wrong with the concept of having mixed use. In fact, it's been traditional throughout all development of human history and how towns have developed. Part of the problem I've seen over the years in my experience with homeowners is they're so used that they've seen so much bad planning and bad experience with mixed use that they've developed a mind fix that any mixed use, no matter how well you design it or plan it, is going to be bad. I think we have to work and listen to neighborhoods. At the same time, I would hope that maybe my experience as an architect and being able to help people visualize their dreams, that maybe there's a way we can work with neighborhoods to help them visualize how something might be good for them and not bad.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Cass.
You know, I'm a resident of the Rattlesnake Valley, and a few years ago, if you had said the word commercial, you would have heard all kinds of ruckus. However, recently, in the effort to rezone the Rattlesnake, there was a great educational effort to show what mixed use might look like, and suddenly it dawned on the Rattlesnake residents that it didn't mean a Circle K or a gas station. And I think that mixed use is very good. The Rattlesnake is certainly willing to accept that kind of zoning. I think if the rest of the city were to see some mixed-use zoning in the Rattlesnake that was successful, they might be more willing to take it on themselves. And I really do believe in the corner grocery store. I think that is what defines your neighborhood.
Thank you. The next question is Ms. Tracy's, and Mr. Harrison, you'll be the first to answer.
Thank you. What specific steps would you take as mayor to integrate land use and transportation to maintain and enhance Missoula's quality of life?
Okay, the integration of transportation and land use, I think it has to happen in the growth management process. Outside of that, I don't see a good way to do that, because the transportation's important in both city and county, and with the urban fringe, the populated areas in those areas, we need to coordinate with the county as to what we would do there. I think the idea of expanding infrastructure to certain areas and encouraging growth in certain areas would help in the transportation idea also. I think we just did that to some degree with, I'm trying to think what it's called, when they put out the grid system for streets out toward the industrial park there on the other side of the reserve, just in that area there. They were planning on transportation needs as well as land use, so I think those have to be coordinated through that growth management process. I think that's the best way to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Mr. Cadis.
I think particularly as we discuss the notion of urban service areas is one place where we can take up with that issue, and it's important, I think, one of the biggest issues in Missoula is the amount of single vehicle car traffic. And I think that in the long run, it will be more economical for the community to try to develop other alternative forms of transportation so that we're not nearly as reliant on one person in one car. We need to set the framework for that. I think we have some of the tools to do that, but I think there are others that we need to work with. And I certainly don't have all the answers. My general philosophical direction, though, is to try to move so that we're not near a community that is solely reliant on automobiles for getting around.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson, how would you integrate land use and transportation?
I think one of the things that we would need to do is to get ahead of the curve on the transportation bit. And I think the grid system that was just mentioned on the West Missoula area up between here and the Y is a good example of that. I think if you establish some of the transportation corridors, including new interchange at the airport and perhaps an extension interchange out at the Y so that there's another way to get up 93 without coming through town would be most helpful on it. But it'd be nice to get the alternative transportation, and I think we can do some of those things, but nevertheless, I think the automobile is going to be here to stay in Missoula for a while yet.
Thank you. Mr. Sweet.
Well, I think there are many steps that we can take to integrate land use and transportation. And I think we need to look very hard at setting some goals for a reduction of vehicle miles driven, and we do that through encouraging infill development, looking at development that's occurring outside the city limits, and encouraging it to be more of mixed use. I think whether that takes place in the growth management forum or just through some other forum, I think it doesn't matter so long as it gets done. I think we need to continue to support a regional approach to traffic demand management, in particular with the area down in the Bitterroot. And I think that's directly tied to our air quality and our quality of life here in our community. I think we also have to take a long, hard look at what the cost is of transportation and maintaining our transportation infrastructure and weigh that against the cost benefits against the type of development that has been occurring.
Thank you. Mr. Badnock.
Well, this is clearly a question that we could spend a lot more than a minute on. I think that one of the things you do to integrate transportation and land use planning is you work to integrate the infrastructure with the development. Developments of a certain size, for example, maybe the city needs to require bus turnouts or bus shelters be included in those developments. Certainly the provision of trails and bikeways to give people an alternative way to get to and from work, from school, to visit their neighbors. A neighborhood that doesn't have sidewalks is a neighborhood where there's no place worth walking. And I think those are the kinds of things that we have to be aware of, that the city has to be aware of when it makes its land use policies. I think besides my friend John Fletcher tonight, maybe a few others in the audience tonight, I think I'm the only one that rode a bike. I don't know, maybe there's more, but I think you show also by example. You walk the walk, you ride the bike.
Thank you. Mr. Ballas.
I'm going to be honest with the council, probably an issue that I don't know a whole lot about. But I do think anytime you have to integrate any kind of planning into some kind of master planning situation, one thing that I know as we developed our highways, and architects and engineers always have a thing going on that architects would like to see engineers go to sensitivity school on how to understand some of the human impacts that they go on. But I think that's a learning process that we all have to take to learn how to integrate our major transportation systems, which we can't really live without. Our neighborhoods have to be connected. We have to find ways to make them humanistic and compatible with good quality of life.
Thank you. Ms. Cass, how would you integrate land use and transportation?
Well, I have just completed reading the draft transportation plan that our planning office has put together. I find it a very interesting plan. It deals with everything from public transit to our road system. I do think, however, that one thing that doesn't get discussed very often is connecting our neighborhoods. I'm often concerned about new developments that have cul-de-sacs or pods where people cannot get from one neighborhood to another. Where I live, my children have to walk out onto the street and down the 45-mile-an-hour road and then back in unless they want to tramp over someone's flowers. And I think it's very important that we connect our neighborhoods and that we know our neighbors.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Charney.
I think overall land use and transportation should be on a regional basis. That does not mean the city has no role in this. And the city has to provide like Craig said, the infrastructure within the city for the alternate means of transportation, the bike paths, the sidewalks, and the arterial streets planning to handle cars, because I agree with Al that the cars are not going to go away. And bicycles and walking is a good alternative if you can do it, but it's not going to replace cars completely.
Thank you. The next question is Mr. McGrath's, and Mr. Cadis, you'll be the first to respond.
Thanks. The mayor who's leaving has been a relatively popular mayor, although he has been criticized from a variety of perspectives. I'm curious as to one specific example you might give as to something that Mayor Kemmis did that you would do differently, and why?
I think that probably the biggest difference you'll see between Dan and I is that, well, let me give you two differences. One is that I will not speak as well as he does. I am not as articulate as Dan Kemmis is. The other is I think I will spend particularly more time with the council. I will spend more time with council meetings and with individuals on the council. I have a lot to learn, and frankly, I see you as being a big part of that learning process.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson.
I think Dan has done a very good job in almost all areas, and in fact, probably in all areas. One of my main differences I would have more of a hand on day-to-day operation of the city than Dan does. I'd spend more time in Missoula.
Thank you. Mr. Sweet, what would you have done differently and why?
Well, I'll give you 3 examples that I see. One would be the Mayor's Roundtable. I think if I were to have something that might remotely be a Mayor's Roundtable, I would invite some different people to the table, people that don't often get asked to sit at the table. Another area would be transportation. As many of you know, the mayor is a voting member on the Transportation Policy Coordinating Committee, and I would feel a strong obligation to work very closely with this city council in developing transportation policy and representing this city council on that board. And like Mr. Cadis, I would spend much more time and be much more accessible to the council and working with the council, and I would attend council committee meetings, as many as I could at least.
Thank you. Mr. Badenoch.
Well, the book I'm writing is a children's story, and I don't have any imagination that it's going to be as popular as either one of Mayor Kemmis's books. So that's one example. I won't write a successful book. I think I would probably try to spend more time working with the council in identifying the issues, identifying the problems, as I said before, asking good questions. I'm convinced deeply that that's how we will advance the city, and that's how we will advance the public's agenda, only by asking good questions. And I think I would work with the council. My aim would be to work with the council to help the council ask those questions.
Thank you. Mr. Ballas.
I guess I have to reiterate there that I would spend as much time as I possibly could working with the council and the city and spend more time in the office. That's what I'm used to doing every day as a small business person. But I think the other option that I would do is maybe reach out a little more into the business community and try to get those people in small business that feel that they don't have enough time and input to get into city government. And I guess I would actively promote trying to get at least some input and participation from more small business people.
Thank you. Ms. Cass, what would you do differently and why?
I think Mayor Kemmis has done a very good job as mayor. I would like, if I were appointed mayor, to spend more time visiting with the people of the city of Missoula. I would be interested in speaking to businessmen, to parents, to daycare providers, to people of all walks of life in Missoula, to see what their interests are and to bring that back to the city council room.
Thank you. Mr. Charney.
Well, as already stated, I will not considering myself to run for the position of mayor after this appointment. So therefore, in the short term, my major difference would be more hand-on policy in administrating the city and working with the council. I guess that's it.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Harrison.
I guess I'd also have more hands-on, a closer working relationship with the administration and the council both. But for a very specific area, I think I would have ended Vision 2020 process sooner. Basically, that was an excellent idea to get input from the community on what this community would like to see. I think by extending that process too long, I think that really hurt us because now we hardly look at that as a tool for utilization. I think it's a very good tool to utilize in the area of where we're going. I think if I would have done anything different, I would have done that. I would have ended that process sooner.
Thank you. Mr. Bennett, you have the next question, and Mr. Sampson, you'll answer first.
Okay. I realize some of you are already on record as saying you won't seek re-election, and some of you don't know yet, but let's pretend, and if you all did, would you be willing to sign an endorsement contract with any political group?
I have been a long-time Democrat, and one of the nice things about Democrats, I guess, is that we're a pretty diverse group. I would not sign, nor would I feel it was necessary to sign any type of contract with any political organization because what you see is what you get. And I've been in the community long enough, been active long enough so that if the people don't like me, don't elect me.
Thank you, Mr. Sampson. Mr. Sweet.
Well, like Mr. Sampson, I too am a longtime Democrat, and I would hope, if I should run for re-election, that the Democratic Party would endorse me. Yeah, I would sign an endorsement contract. I would sign one with the citizens of Missoula immediately upon taking office, and another one if I should be re-elected. And if I were asked to by another political group, if I believe in what they're doing, and if it's going to hold me accountable for the things I say and the things I do, then yes, I would. I would consider signing it.
Thank you. Mr. Badnock.
The citizens of Missoula passed a charter 45 days ago where they indicated 64% of the voters said that they preferred to have city elections carried out on a nonpartisan basis, and that will be the way elections will be carried on in the future. As for carrying on or entering into a contract with anybody or any group as to my performance, the answer is no. I believe, like Al, that I pretty much stand for myself and who I am, and if that isn't good enough, certainly we'll ask the voters to elect someone else.
Thank you. Mr. Ballas.
I think that's the reason why the voters approved a nonpartisan poll, so that we don't get so hung up in Democrat, Republicans, New Party, Pro, whoever you are. I think it's more important to be the people that you're, the person that you are, and what you can do. And I don't think I would agree to sign any kind of contract.
Thank you. Ms. Cass.
To be perfectly honest with you, I don't know what an endorsement contract is. I do not belong to any particular political party. But if I had to characterize myself and put a label on myself, I would probably call myself a moderate Democrat. I have never run for office. I have been appointed by the governor's office to a committee and by the county commissioners and by the city council to various committees. So I do feel I know something about government, but I am not involved in politics.
Thank you. Mr. Charney, would you sign an endorsement contract with any political group?
I never have, and I don't plan to in the future, never will. If the game was played that I would be running, I'm not going to run. But even when I've run under the Democratic banner, I've never even signed a commitment to the Democratic platform, because there are parts of the platform where I will differ. And I am what you see and what you get, and I'll differ with my own party when I believe it's wrong.
Thank you. Mr. Harrison.
I'm not signing any contract along that lines. I fully supported the nonpartisan elections. I don't believe that local government is any place for partisan politics. I think also the mayor needs to make some extremely difficult decisions, and the council also, for that matter. And so I think, and those decisions may not line up with the political party, any political party that you might have affiliation with. And so I think it's important not to pre-commit yourself to anything, because if you don't do what's right, basically, then you shouldn't be here.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Cayes.
I don't believe that a contract of any sort is in any way necessary. What I will do, though, is meet pretty much with any group on any time basis, regular or irregular, to discuss issues of importance to the city. And I want to extend that to all groups, whether it's new party or the Republican Party.
Thank you. The final city council question is yours, Ms. Herbig, and Mr. Sweet, you will be the first to answer.
Well, about 3 of my questions have already been asked. So I guess I would ask what your position would be in connection with annexation. And this happens to be a question that surprisingly didn't even come up in the public questions.
Well, my inclination is that in terms of large annexations, we're probably through with those for a little while now. But I do think we need to come up with a better process for annexation. I think we need to work more closely with the county in developing that process. And we should always be looking at better ways to provide services to the urbanized area, whether it be police or fire protection, sewer, that type of service. So I think it kind of works together as you're working through the process of working with the county on how we can better deliver services, or you're working with the fire districts on how to better deliver service. I think we can come up with a better way of doing annexations.
Thank you. Mr. Badenoch.
I agree with Craig. I think most of the annexation work, the large annexation work, is done. And I don't see that there's a need to continue with it on any grand scale in the future. I think the thing to remember is that annexation isn't an end to itself. We don't annex because we can, or we don't annex simply because it's a good idea. Simply bringing those parts of the urbanized community together under one government made a lot of sense when we did it before, when we annexed. That made sense. It was a very painful thing for a lot of people, but it made a lot of sense to provide some coherence to the governance. And I think that if we are able to work with the county in the future, both in the development of the neighborhoods that are outside the urban area, then the annexations at the time when those people, as the city grows, come into the city, it will be a lot less painful.
Thank you. Mr. Bowles.
Yes, I would like to see us probably re-examine our whole annexation policy. I think we'd like to see us make the city attractive enough that the people outside the city would come into the city instead of us forcing them in. I do see an issue coming up between Missoula and East Missoula, and that's how the sewer is. I think maybe the city needs to look at how it can market its sewer to outside areas without forcing them into the city proper itself. We've got to look at the more important part, and that is to protect our water quality and expand our service, sewer service to those areas that can benefit from it.
Thank you. Ms. Cass, what's your position on annexation?
I think in certain cases annexation is certainly necessary. I'm sure we've all heard the old story about you live outside the city and you drive on our streets and you use our library and you use all our other services. You should be part of the city. I don't believe that's true in all cases, however. And I am somewhat interested in the fact that the Growth Management Task Force is talking about urban service area boundaries, and I would like to know how that will affect our annexation policy in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Charney.
I'm a believer in annexation, and not because to add people to the city necessarily, but specifically commercial areas, because I think it's an unfair advantage, and we owe the protection to the business people that are already in the city, that they have fair competition, and they don't have competition from people outside the city or close to the city, taking city business away from them because they have a lower cost of operation with lower taxes and so forth. So I think we owe it to the business community of Missoula to annex future commercial areas outside of town.
Thank you. Mr. Harrison.
I believe annexation as a major issue in the city is pretty much over, but I'd just like to say a couple of things on it. I think it was a mistake to annex the valleys, whether you go up Granite Creek or whether you go up the Rattlesnake, because of the cost of services that are tied to going up in the valleys. I think that costs the main city residents a lot more money because of that. However, I think annexation is good when it provides a good for the whole community. If your water quality is threatened, I think then it's incumbent upon the community to do its best to protect that. In establishing urban services areas, if we continue the way we're heading right now, I think there'll be incentives in the future to come into the city as opposed to the city going out and trying to bring people in. More people will be coming in to get certain services, and so I believe that's a good route to go.
Thank you. Mr. Cadis.
Since my first days in the legislature, I've been involved with the annexation issue. I've always been on the side of strengthening the powers of cities in Montana to annex. I think we have some of the weakest annexation laws in the country, and I think it's a gross mistake. I was very active in the defense of annexation laws and city powers in the last session as they came under attack, and I will continue to be. I think I can help Missoula as the mayor when it comes to taking those fights to the legislature. I think the annexation is so important because without it, you lose the integrity of the idea and the reality of a city. If you have another city outside of the city proper, you really don't have a city anymore. What you have is a bunch of people subsidizing the people who live on the outside. And of course, the people on the outside would love to be subsidized.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson.
Wait a minute. Am I out of time or 30 seconds? I'm not
30
done.
seconds.
Yeah, okay.
You can keep going.
I disagree with the notion that we are done annexing. We are done annexing for the near term. I think within 5 years, we're going to see more annexations, and we need to work so we can bring those people into the city. I want to bring them in smoothly and cooperatively, but ultimately, we have to bring them in.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Sampson.
I've been pro-annexation ever since I've been involved with city government, which has been 40 years ago. I think any time that a group of people are receiving city services, they should be annexed to the city and pay city taxes. I don't agree that we're all through annexing. I think in the very near future we're looking at Miller Creek. We've got an agreement we weren't going to annex them until X number of people hooked onto the sewer and so on and so forth, but there's a substantial group of people there that is now using our services, and I think we're going to annex them. I think the city is going to continue to grow on to the west, and I think it should be orderly. I think we should do it quickly rather than wait and procrastinate over it. I think when they start receiving city services, they ought to be annexed.
Thank you. We're now going to have a second follow-up dialogue period. Remember that each of you can speak twice for 30 seconds each time, and you can comment or clarify anything that's gone on earlier. Just raise your hand if you'd like to speak. Mr. Sweet.
I'd like to just briefly go back to Mrs. Chingarelli's question regarding density and neighborhood commercial. I think we're going to have to face up to density, especially as far as infill development goes. But I think before we do that, there's a lot that we have to do. We have to do a lot of education, and we have to get the tools in place in terms of design tools in order to make it happen more smoothly. And the other thing that does concern me is the protest provision in the state subdivision regulations. I think when one person and 4 council members can hold up something, I think there's something unjust about it.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson?
I would like to say a word on what I had forgotten about the Montana League of Cities. In my resume, I did not mention that, but I'm past president of the Montana League of Cities, been active in the League of Cities all the time. I was on the city council, and I would hope that the city council continues to be active in the League of Cities. I think it's very good for the city.
Thank you. Mr. Charney.
Tonight, but I understand there's a question about when I was mayor of Juneau, Alaska. And to clarify, oh, sorry, start over. It didn't come up tonight, but I understand there's been a question about what I was mayor of in Juneau, Alaska. At the time I was elected mayor, area-wide, we had 3 municipal governments. We had a city of Douglas, a city of Juneau, and what was called the Juneau Borough. And the Juneau Borough had mandatory powers over the cities, the 2 cities, as well as all municipal powers over the area outside the city. I was elected area-wide of the borough. At the end of my term, I led the community into dissolving the 3 governments and forming one unified government. So I hope that clarifies it, that I was the mayor of Juneau. At the time, it was called borough chairman,
Okay.
but subsequently changed to borough mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Cass.
I've been following the growth management process for some time. I've been part of the scenarios process. I've worked with that committee for a long, long time, getting scenarios put together of what we would like Missoula to look like. And we talked about tools that could be used to make Missoula look the way we would like to. I would like to say that I am very much in favor of impact fees, especially for education if possible.
Thank you. Mr. Ballas?
Yes, the question of impact fees I find very interesting, because I sometimes wonder if people really understand who ends up paying impact fees. It doesn't necessarily come out of some developer's pocket. Every fee that we charged is passed on to the people that eventually buy the house, and it is a relating factor that's driving up our housing cost and the cost of land.
Thank you. I saw Mr. Harrison's hand.
One issue in the area of impact fees, I think it's important as we progress with this that impact fees are tied directly to the to whatever development if we do pursue that area. As far as education goes, right now the state law specifically exempts education. I think it's very important. One of my concerns in the balance of how we proceed with this is that we do not ignore the political culture of the state or federal government. I think it's extremely important if we're going to be successful in this area.
Thank you. Mr. Sweet, second time.
Yes, just for a point of clarity, I don't want to imply that if I am mayor and I get reelected, there won't be any more annexations. I think we need to make it very clear what our intentions are in terms of annexing the urbanized area. And as I said, work very closely with our county government and the people in those areas to make it as smooth as possible.
Thank you. Mr. Badnock?
A little over 10
10 years ago, 3 very good minds in Missoula, Christina Ford, Jim Lopatch, and Dennis O'Donnell, wrote a little book called Planning for Small Town America. And in that book, they discussed a topic called committed lands, the philosophy of committed lands, where governmental districts, whether it's the city or the schools or whatever, have established where they're going to provide services. I think it'd be a good idea for us to revisit that book to guide our thinking on the annexation questions and what we're going to do with our growth management.
Mr. Cadis, did I see your hand?
Yes. With regard to impact fees, I want to disagree a little bit with Mr. Ballas. Impact fees will not entirely be passed on to the consumer of the home or the development. As price increases, both the developer and the consumer will share in that increased cost. I don't think that's entirely out of the question. I also don't think it's entirely out of the question that some homes will cost more. I mean, even if we look at the current real estate market compared to 5 years ago, we've seen as much as 100% increase in cost, and people are still buying homes.
Thank you. Ms. Cass.
Back to impact fees in education. I am well aware that specific impact fees to furnish improvements, capital improvements for education are not allowed under state statute. However, I do also know that the subdivision process allows us to review the impacts of a subdivision on education and to attempt to mitigate those impacts. And the developer can be asked to deal with the schools.
Thank you. Mr. Harrison?
There'd only be one developer asked to mitigate the impacts in the school, because at the next legislative session, you'd have a whole organization over there to change that. And so that's what I'm concerned about with progressing in the future with this idea. It needs to be very, very fair. The impacts need to be clearly tied to the impacts of a development. Otherwise, you'll lose the whole concept.
Other comments? Mr. Cadis?
What I hear Mr. Harrison saying is something I agree with, and that is to go slow and be careful, make sure that we do it in a way that is going to work in the long term, and build our base, particularly so that we don't get our legs cut out from under us in the legislature.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. We'll move on to the final 3 questions. And this one, Mr. Badnock, you'll be the first to answer. How would you use the office of the mayor to lead the community?
Well, at the risk of being accused of being a Jesse Jackson soundbite, I would try to listen to establish the vision, followed by decision. And what I mean by that is, as mayor, I'd be willing to talk and listen to anybody to help shape the vision. The vision is constantly evolving for this community and will continue to do so. But I think it's important that we follow the vision with decisions that allow the progress to occur. And I think as mayor, I would be willing to make the decisions that need to be made, that are the mayor's to make, to carry the city forward. And that's what I would do.
Thank you. Mr. Ballas?
How would I use the office to lead the community? I would use the office by example, communication, and trust building. I would go out and use the office to communicate with the whole community, as many different factions as you possibly can. I think the office needs to be utmost honest and straightforward with the community. The community needs to develop a tremendous trust that anything and everything that comes out of the mayor is fair and reasonable, even though some of the things that come out once in a while.
Thank you. Ms. Cass, how would you use the office of mayor to lead the community?
Missoula goes by many names, such as the Garden City or even Paris, Montana. But I'd like everybody to know that we are the caring city. I've never lived anywhere yet where people are so involved with community issues. But I'm seeing the decline of neighborliness. Do we know our neighbors? I say we don't know our neighbors anymore. Issues have become more important than people, and I would like to be the know your neighbor mayor. If we don't understand and respect each other on a very basic human level, our community will no longer be a community, but merely a collection of households connected only through physical proximity to one another.
Thank you. Mr. Charney.
I believe the two most important things that a mayor can do to lead the community are to inform the community what's going on and to be informed by the community of what their needs and desires are. And in that regard, first I would change the budget process to let people know what they're buying with their taxes, and then consider their input to be informed by having the open door policy on my office, guaranteed set aside time that anybody can show up, and my calendar will be free. They will not get an excuse that I'm in a meeting somewhere or I've got another appointment. There'll be an absolute designated time each week when people can come in on a first come, first served basis and see me.
Thank you. Mr. Harrison.
First, I'd lead the city with integrity and honor. I'd use the office of the mayor to implement the city council policy in the most effective ways. I think by being willing to make difficult administrative decisions, we as a governing body could be an example to the community that we were willing to do whatever it took to make this community the best place to live as possible. I believe the mayor needs to be highly visible. I believe he needs to have good relationships with other governing agencies.
Thank you. Mr. Cadis, how would you use the office of mayor to lead the community?
I believe that the mayor must be the key liaison between the city and the community and the council. I would work hard to develop good working relationships with the council and to work with the community to anticipate problems, help define options to those problems, and then implement solutions. I think that is a community process. That's something that the mayor needs to take out of City Hall and onto the streets so that we're communicating and we're working together. I think I have a good enough understanding of the community that I can do that I can identify problems and that I can identify the people who need to sit down and work together to develop solutions. I think maintaining active and interested relationships with the university, the business community, and neighborhoods is a critical issue. And I also believe that something that I can specifically bring is a good working relationship with the legislature and other communities in the state. Much of what Missoula does and needs to do has to do with the legislature. I think I could represent Missoula's interests well in Helena.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson.
I think the mayor and I as the mayor would work with the many diverse groups in the city to come back and formulate some recommendations to the council, work with the council in coming up with some of those community decisions and hopefully work them through to everybody's advantage and like.
And finally, Mr. Sweet, how would you use the office of mayor to lead the community?
Well, I think first and foremost, you must hold a vision for our community, and I would ask you to look back to how I answered question number 3. And I think that vision has to be articulated clearly to and constantly to the community. I think the role of the mayor is one of cheerleader, one of catalyst for community dialogue, a facilitator of debate. The mayor has to be that bridge between the citizens and the council and build that relationship. And I think you have to believe passionately in the process of community building, and you have to believe passionately in those outcomes that can come from community building and involving people in seeking community-wide solutions to our community problems.
Thank you. This next question, Mr. Ballas, you will be the first to answer. With the pending Albright lawsuit in mind, how would you handle a major budget shortfall situation?
I think in a major budget shortfall installation, this is a situation where the council and the mayor's office and staff really have to come together and work. I think our first objective would be to establish priorities within the city budget and city departments. from then on, I think it's primarily it's going to be a city council decision on exactly what you would do. Because my leanings would be to probably take the lowest priorities and possibly eliminate them so that the others to provide the least disruption in the other departments. Bearing that, then you'd probably start going down the line and taking a percentage cut out of each department.
Thank you. Ms. Cass.
Well, first of all, I think it would cause a number of sleepless nights. First thing I would do would be to ask both the experts and the citizens for their advice, and I'm sure there'd be no shortage in that area. I would look at staffing patterns. I would look for job sharing opportunities, more student interns. I would look for other ways to cut the cost of operating government, everything from buying cheaper paper to turning off the lights when we're not in the room. But I know that all those things are probably not going to be nearly enough, that staff and services would have to be cut. So the question would come down to, where do we cut? Police, fire, public works, planning, parks. I can't tell you, I can't even guess at this point where a cut might come, except that I'm sure it would happen in the mayor's salary too.
Thank you. Mr. Charney, with the Albright suit in mind, how would you handle a major budget shortfall?
It's too big of a problem for one person to handle. There would be a lot of hard work and consultation with the council and state officials. It would be a nightmare throughout the state. It's not just Missoula. And I think the state has to be brought into the decision-making process eventually with how are they going to solve the problems of the municipalities of Montana. So it's going to take a lot of hard work. The council is going to have to be involved, the mayor is going to have to be involved, and the state is going to have to be involved.
Thank you. Mr. Harrison.
Okay, first of all, I'd just like to quickly say that we should mention this in light of this case here, but I think we should always be anticipating what could be coming on the horizon. I think that's a very important thing, especially in this area, because it's a trend across the country, this type of thing. So other than that, I think it's very important that the mayor and council have an open dialogue, that they review their priorities, and that they continue with the ones they feel like they have the most impacts on the community. And other than that, I think the idea of a contingency budget is always a good idea, and I think that should be kind of on a consistent pattern. I think the way we pulled out from a cash loss up to where we have a cash surplus is because the department has submitted 2 budgets with a certain percentage reduction.
Thank you. Mr. Cadis.
I've had all too much experience in this type of situation as a legislator and a member of the Appropriations Committee in the late 80s and early 90s. I can recount a number of special sessions where we had to deal with major budget cuts. The situation, as I understand it, due to the Albright situation, I will say that the Albright situation is not nearly as difficult for cities as it will be for schools. But about $1 million out of a $17 million budget, that's about a 6% hit. While that is a significant amount, that is certainly not unmanageable. We can handle that, I think. Some of the ways I think we'd have to do that, the first thing is to send department directors and the budget team back to work and to look at the budget and figure out where they can make reductions. Other things we would need to consider: to restrict new hires, to delay or reduce the implementation of a new pay plan, restrictions on equipment or travel, and a thorough analysis of our cash flow and the reserves that we need to maintain cash flow.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson.
I think it would be a situation where the mayor and the council, with perhaps some other outside help, would have to sit down and do some real prioritizing. The idea of cutting a percentage out of each budget, I don't think is the right idea on it. I think at least temporary freeze on hirings would have to go into effect. I think a close look at a reduction of some services, or specifically doing away with some areas of service. I think another good way would be to look back and see your staffing levels of say 5 years ago, and see what has built up from that, and see whether you really need that or not. Well, you just have to cut back on. No, there's no question about it.
Thank you. Mr. Sweet.
I would handle the situation very much like Mayor Kemmis is handling the situation, by reconvening the budget team, by going back and looking at the rankings of department requests and reprioritizing those. I would offer the council options, and I know the council would have a tough decision to make on that, but the obligation of the mayor is to bring a budget before the council, and there would be hard decisions that the mayor would have to make as well. But we are fortunate in that we have a budget team that has worked the budget many different ways, and I would go back and rely upon their expert advice and their input. And I would also have my finance director on the telephone, talking to Helena, talking to find out as just what might come about with the Albright lawsuit and what its implications will ultimately be.
Thank you. And finally on this question, Mr. Badenoch.
Well, I think most of the candidates gave pretty sound answers to this question. We are doing this. This is, as I said earlier, this is how I spent the bulk of my afternoon. But whenever there's a potential budget shortfall, I think the thing to do is to not panic, but to proceed rationally and examine and understand the problem. Is it something that is a short-term, or is it a lasting problem? If it's short-term, it may be something as simple as postponing capital expenditures. If it's a long-term situation, it may have to be something that's dealt with on a programmatic basis where programs and services are eliminated. I think it's important for people to remember we've been through this. We've been through the belt tightening, the budget cutting, the restraints. And I think that if the council will look at the behavior of the department heads, you will see responsibility in the administration in the past. When we've had to do this, the city staff, the department heads have risen to the challenge and done the job. And I think we can count on that to happen again.
Thank you. This is our final question for the evening, and Ms. Cash will be the first to answer. What would your role as mayor be vis-a-vis the city chief administrative officer and the city council?
I think over the course of the evening, the candidates have all addressed that in one way or another. We've recognized that the council makes city policy, and the mayor is responsible for implementing city policies. The chief administrative officer should be the mayor's right-hand woman and able to make sure that the policies are adhered to, and she should have a good understanding of the big picture and be able to attend government meetings as the mayor's designated. Able to facilitate processes which have specific goals, such as working with department heads in budget sessions, reviewing work plans, etc. She was hired as an administrator, and I believe she should remain an administrator. The mayor is the public relations man or woman, and I would not ask the CAO to attend community meetings unless she expressed interest.
Thank you. Mr. Charney.
I believe I can provide leadership and the overall administrative knowledge needed to work with the city's chief administrative officer. In regards with the city council, I'm willing to brainstorm on all matters with the council and bring new perspectives to the council so that they can, make policy knowing all the pros and the consequences. I think skull sessions on problems where people can play devil's advocate and make their arguments can mean an awful lot in a role of a mayor to working in conjunction with the city council.
Thank you. Mr. Harrison.
I believe the mayor and the chief administrative officer should work closely together in managing the affairs of the city. Ultimately, though, it's the mayor that has the responsibility of that management. The buck does stop with the mayor. The CAO is extremely important to the affairs of the city, but on the whole, I think it's unfair to kind of dump the whole administration on the CAO. I think in addition to that, I think it's extremely important that the mayor continue like the sister cities relationships, those type of relationships, because I think they will benefit our community in the future. I think the mayor also should deal directly with the governor's office and with the state legislature as well as the county commissioners. As far as the city council goes, I believe I would prefer a more open door policy with the city council. It's critical to communications between the mayor and the council. Both individually and collectively, I think it's important, because I think what's happened with our strategic planning, I'm hurrying, what's happened with our strategic planning is the mayor's office has kind of led that, and I think that's kind of backwards from, so I'll talk about that later.
Thank you. Mr. Cadis, what would your role as mayor be vis-a-vis the city, chief administrator, and the city council?
In general, I believe that the CAO is primarily responsible for the oversight and management of the staff and of the basic operation, police, fire, health, roads, and planning. I think that the mayor is primarily responsible for the relationships with the council and with the community, for anticipating problems and working with the community and the council to develop solutions. I think there will be inevitably some crossover between those two roles, but those are the kind of the basic dividing line. I think that it has to continue to be clear that the CAO works for the mayor, and that ultimately the mayor is responsible for all the things that get done on the administrative side of city government.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson.
I think the mayor and chief administrative officer should be leading the day-to-day operation of the city. The mayor cannot do it all and should not be doing it all, but I think the mayor should be informed of the operation quite closely. I think the mayor should be working very closely with the city council, open door policy of the city council, and I think the mayor should be attending as many of the council committee meetings as possible. I think that's the only way the mayor can stay up on what is going on with the city council. The mayor should also be the liaison with the county commissioners, the state, the League of Cities, and I think with the community in general.
Thank you. Mr. Sweet.
Well, I agree with Mr. Cadis and Mr. Sampson in their assessment of what the chief administrator's role is. I do agree with that, and I feel that in the 3 years that I've been on the council, I've gotten to have a pretty good understanding of what the staff's role is as well, and I am very respectful of what their role is and very supportive of their role in bringing services to our community. As far as the council goes and the mayor, I think that's where there's room for improvement, and I think having served on the council, I have a pretty good understanding of how the council views the mayor's position, and I would not want to abuse that. However, I think the mayor needs to work very closely with the council and with the citizens in our community in developing and crafting policy and solutions.
Thank you. Mr. Badenoch.
I'll remind everyone just one more time that there was a time when I did this job, and from the inside, looking out as CAO, I know that the one thing that a mayor needs to look for in a CAO is wisdom, experience, intelligence, and someone who's savvy about the way the political world operates. The question is kind of generic, but I think to the specific case, the CAO that we have now, Janet Stevens, is someone who embodies all those characteristics. With respect to the council, before we adopted our charter, we had a weak mayor, strong council form of government. There is still a tension, there is still a balance of power that goes on between the two the two branches of government. It doesn't have to be a conflict. I think it is probably more appropriately looked at as an elegant dance. The power will swing back and forth. That's the way it's designed to do. It's supposed to work that way. Ultimately, the roles are established as to who's supposed to do what.
Thank you. And Mr. Ballas.
I think we pretty much established what the role of the CAO and the mayor and the council actually is. If I were appointed mayor, I would be kind of an odd man out, because one of the persons that really hasn't worked with the mayor or the CAO. I would like the opportunity, since the CAO is working under an existing agreement, I'd like the opportunity to sit down and visit with her and I'd have to find out in great more detail exactly how she works. I'd like to jointly work out an arrangement how the CEO and the mayor would actually work with the council, because I think there needs to be some overlap. As a mayor, though, I would prefer to being an active participation in ongoing affairs and a full-time participant. And I'd like to get to know the department heads and the staff as well as I possibly can, so I could fully understand the circumstances they work under too.
Thank you. We're now to the final segment of this evening's forum, closing comments. Each applicant may have up to 2 minutes to make a closing remark, and we'll begin with you, Mr. Charney.
First of all, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters and the council for the opportunity to participate in this process, and especially my own councilman for nominating me so that I'm here tonight. Personally, I don't expect a lot of support on the first number of ballots that you take when you fill this acting mayor position. You're all going to have your favorites. I have not lobbied for any of you for the position. Just as you deliberate on this position, and if you're unable to come to an early decision, I would ask for your support as a compromise candidate who's qualified, capable, knowledgeable about the position, and will do the job that you expect to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harrison.
I'd also like to thank you for conducting this forum and giving the people the opportunity to hear everyone who's applied. I'd like to conclude by stating the following. The selection processes by the council are very, very difficult. And with this one in particular, there are several very, very good candidates. And so any vote can be easily justified. So I think that's important to know. It's been my experience that most of the changes that give a community a long-term benefit come when everyone in the community can relate to the players. I've done my best while on the city council, it was 10.5 years on the city council, to look at this community as a whole and not to be dominated by 1 or 2 issues. I believe we need a balance, and I think I can provide that balance. I bring to this position 3 major attributes that I think is very important for the next mayor to possess. Number 1, I bring a historical perspective and a respect for continuity. Number 2, I bring administrative experience. And number 3, I bring a balance of concerns. It matters to me what happens to this community and what this community becomes. This is a difficult decision. It needs to transcend political boundaries. What you need to do what you need to do for the good of this community. So I ask that you just reflect on this. It's a very serious decision, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cadis.
I would like to thank the League and the Council, and particularly the citizens of Missoula who participated in this process, those who called into the Missoulian to help define and form the questions that we used tonight. I'd also like to thank the citizens who have called all of you. And I will continue to ask them to do that, not just those who have called supporting me, but all of those citizens who have called supporting anybody. I think ultimately this is an election. We have a little different polling method. We get to vote as many times as we want. We just don't do it in the elections office or at the polling booth. I encourage you to listen to those calls, and I encourage people to keep making them. I think that what I bring to this I bring something that is critical at this point in the council's and in the city's juncture in history. I think I bring the experience to help people work together to deal with difficult problems and to move on to the next problem, because there's more than one that we have to deal with, without animosity, to be able to continue to work as a group. I think I can help us all do better than we would individually. I think I've gained a measure of respect in my years in the legislature across the political spectrum. I have a lot of experience working with a broad diversity of people, from oilmen and cowboys from Miles City and farther east to the people of western Montana. I think that experience is critical to making this council as good as it can be. I also think that I have the budgetary experience that is required in a job like this. We have to be able to be accountable to the public. Our budgeting and our ability to show the public that we're spending our dollars wisely is critical. It is one thing that, one of the things that legitimizes us in the public eye. Without that legitimacy, we cannot move forward. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson.
I too would like to thank the League of Women Voters for the putting on this forum and the opportunity for presenting ourselves to the public in this manner. I also would like to thank Jack Reedy for nominating me for this particular position. I think I bring the most city administration experience of any of the candidates here. I've had more budgetary experience in the city of Missoula than the rest of them. This budgetary year is the first time in 15 years that I've not been very closely associated with the budget, and in fact very much shaping the budget. And I think I can do the city a good job, and I think I can work with the council well. I think I can work with the public well, and it's going to be a difficult process. I've sat through several different elections of council representatives who during vacancies. I did not sit through, I think the only council member who has sat through a mayoral election is Lois Herbig, who was on the council when John Toole was elected as mayor. So it's a very difficult process, and I don't envy your decisions. I think you're very fortunate in having many good candidates.
Thank you. Mr. Sweet.
I too would like to thank the League for hosting this for us and helping the council put this forum together. I'd like to thank the council for their wisdom in holding this forum in this manner. I think it may not be the perfect solution to selecting a new mayor, but I think it's a big step forward. I also want to thank the members of our community who called in with their questions. I want to thank the staff who sent email questions to the city clerk and to myself and to others. And I think it gave a lot of people an opportunity to participate. I'm not certain that just anyone could step into the role and fill Mayor Kemmis' shoes, but I feel that in the last 3 years I've come to know the city problems that our community and our council have been grappling with, especially in the areas of housing, the areas of transportation and growth management. So I think I bring a little bit more of an insight into what the particular problems have been and what the politics are. I feel that I have credibility within our community, within the business community, within the labor community, within the low-income community, to bring a diverse group of Missoulians together to do the type of community building we must do, to have the community dialogue that we need to have in order to find those common values we share and find those solutions. Problem solving is a little bit like peeling an onion. In there somewhere is a solution, and on the way to it you might shed a few tears, but you have to be darn persistent. You have to keep going. I would like to have your support. I will be a mayor that will use a lot of passion. I will be persistent, and I will work with you to find solutions to the problems our community faces.
Thank you. Mr. Badenoch.
I too will add my thanks to the League for hosting this forum and giving the public a chance to examine the candidates. I thank the council for their attention and for the hard work that they're going to do to make this decision. And I'd also like to thank everyone else up on the dais for stepping forward and being willing to not only subject themselves to this ordeal, but to express a willingness to take on the mantle of leadership in the mayor's office. I think that's one of the finest hallmarks of our democratic system is people's willingness to do public service. I want to be very clear to the council. I don't feel very passionate about this particular job and being the mayor. That's one of the reasons why I haven't inundated you or tried to inundate you with a lot of calls from supporters. I know that there has been some. My passion is for this community. I've been able to express it over the last 11 years or so in my work. It's something that I stand before you proudly. I'm proud of the work that I've done on behalf of the community, and I will continue to do good work for the community. If in your judgment I can continue my good work in the community as the mayor, I will apply the same dedication and earnestness and passion that I do to the job I do now. Thank you again for your attention.
Thank you. Mr. Ballas.
I'd like to, again, with all the people up here on this panel, extend my thanks to the League of Women Voters, to the citizens of Missoula for listening to us, to the City Council for putting together a process that I hope the community can feel confidence in, that you've conducted a good public hearing. I am equally impressed with all of the fellow people that are sitting up at this table with me. I'm impressed with their answers and their outlook on it. It's amazing how so many of our answers and our interests are the same, and I think that bears from the fact that we're all here because Missoula is important to us, you're important to us, the communities are important to us, and that's probably the main guiding factor why we're all here. Why am I here? Because I guess some of my activities with the City Council, I kind of sensed a very sensitive balance on the council at this time. I'd like to try to bring some stability to the council as quickly as I can. I'm a little bit concerned that if we start changing chairs, that you have to continue this unrest and this unknown as you go through. If you appoint somebody on the council right now to mayor, then you have to turn around and find somebody to replace that person. And it kind of continues an uncertainty in the whole community and maybe disrupts a little bit from your ability to attack some of the important issues that you have to discuss right now. I do represent homeowners. I've raised a family here. I hope my family stays and grows. I'm a small business person with a long history. I think I can be a reputable interface between you and all of the citizens of Missoula. Thank you for your support and your patience.
Thank you. And Ms. Cass.
I too would like to thank the League and everyone who has been supportive of my being here this evening. That includes my family and friends, especially those friends who made a special effort to call me today and wish me well. Let me address who I am and why I'd make a good mayor. First, I'm Becky and Betsy's mom. That fact has colored much of what I do. I've been active in many organizations that are family-oriented. I've worked with homeless families and seen the pain and bewilderment that situation brings with it. From that experience, I've learned that it's important to make realistic choices in your life, to depend on yourself, and don't expect a white knight to appear at the last minute. I've worked with school children and have learned that each person is a unique and valuable member in our community. Each of us deserves to be respected and accepted for who we are. I've worked with many nonprofits and have learned that people give in many ways. Some give money, some give time, and some give their life's work to a cause that is dear to them. Well, what does all this have to do with whether I should be appointed mayor? I think if you've been listening, it shows you the kind of person that I am. I love this community. I love its people. I listen to and respect the people of this town. As mayor, I would be not only civil, but courteous, and perhaps bring a different perspective to some of the issues. I feel that government is a social construct which provides a framework which defines our responsibilities as well as our freedoms. I have no plans to rock the boat or upset the apple cart at City Hall. There are many talented and dedicated people among our elected officials and city staff, And since I have 10 seconds left, I would just like to point out that I first came to Montana at age 4, and I've been coming and going ever since. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank all of you applicants for your thoughtful responses this evening and for your willingness to undertake the public service as serving for mayor. I'd also like to thank the City Clerk's Office for their assistance with this forum, and to the City Council for this public process and for asking the League of Women Voters to participate. Finally, I'd like to thank our League's president, Sarah Busey, for her hard work in putting this forum together, and my other League volunteers here tonight. Good night.